A billionaire abandoned his 5-year-old daughter in the freezing mountains, her tiny hands trembling as snow swallowed her footsteps. He convinced himself she wouldn't survive the night. He told himself the world would never know what he'd done. 15 years later, beneath crystal chandeliers and the glare of flashing cameras, he stood celebrated, untouchable, until the air shifted. Just a few steps away stood a young woman with familiar eyes and a quiet, unshakable calm. She wasn't there to beg. She wasn't there to forgive. She had returned for one thing only: the truth he buried in the cold. The road vanished hours ago, swallowed by ice and towering pines. Sky sat in the back seat, her small body wrapped in a thin blanket that did little to quiet her coughing. Each breath sounded like a fragile promise about to break. Her father never looked back. His hands gripped the steering wheel as if letting go, even for a second, might expose something human inside him. When the car finally stopped, the silence was heavy. Snow fell softly, indifferent to the little girl's fever and trembling lips. He opened the door and told her they were going for a walk. Sky believed him. She always did. They walked deeper into the mountains, where the air cut sharper and the trees pressed closer together. Sky stumbled, her legs weak, her red cardigan fluttering against the white like a warning flare. "Daddy, I'm tired," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." He paused. For a moment, it seemed like he might turn around, might pick her up, might remember that she was 5 years old and scared and still called him daddy. Instead, his face hardened. He knelt, adjusted her scarf with careful hands, then stood. "I'll be right back," he said. Sky watched his back disappear between the trees. Seconds stretched into minutes. Her breaths grew shallow. The cold crept in her bones, numbing her fingers, her toes, her hope. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Snow pressed against her cheek as she collapsed. The red cardigan now half buried, the last bright proof that she had existed. The forest went quiet. Too quiet. What her father never knew was that this was never meant to be an accident. Hidden among the trees, a man watched her through the falling snow. He had been paid, well, to follow them. Paid to make sure the child never walked out of these mountains alive. And now, as Sky's eyes fluttered closed, he stepped forward, unsure whether he was about to finish the job or change everything. Elias had learned long ago how to disappear, how to stand in shadows and become part of the background. It was a skill poverty taught you, one you mastered when the world stopped noticing you except when it needed something done quietly. He stood among the trees now, coat pulled tight, breath fogging the frozen air. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. No message, no reminder. He didn't need one. He already knew what was expected of him. Don't interfere. Let nature finish it. Walk away. The money promised for this job could erase years of debt. It could stop the calls, the threats, the sleepless nights. It could buy silence for a while longer. Elias told himself he wouldn't look closely. Children were easier that way, when they stayed abstract. But then the girl collapsed. She was so small, smaller than he'd imagined. Her breathing came in thin, uneven gasps, each one sounding like it might be her last. Snow clung to her eyelashes. Her lips were tinged blue, and that red cardigan, so painfully bright against the white, felt like an accusation. Elias took a step closer. "Hey, stay with me," he whispered, though he didn't know why. He wasn't supposed to speak to her. He wasn't supposed to care. She didn't answer. Her chest barely moved. Something inside him cracked open. Something he'd sealed off years ago, the day he buried his own little girl after a winter flu turned into something crueler. Hospitals, machines, apologies that came too late. He had stood helpless then, too. "No," he said aloud, the words sharp in the silent forest. "Not again." The rules dissolved. The money vanished from his mind. There was only the child. Elias dropped to his knees, brushing snow from her face, pressing his ear to her chest. A heartbeat, weak but there. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her, lifting her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like the world had already begun letting her go. He ran. Snow burned his lungs as he pushed through the trees, stumbling, refusing to stop. His truck was parked farther than he remembered, or maybe fear stretched the distance. He fumbled with the keys, hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice. When the engine finally roared to life, he blasted the heater and laid her gently across the seat, rubbing her hands, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "Hold on," he said again and again. "Please hold on." The hospital lights cut through the night like a miracle. Elias carried her inside, shouting for help, his voice breaking as doctors rushed forward. Questions flew at him. Her name, her age, her parents. He froze. The truth would kill her. He knew that the moment the words formed in his throat. If he told them who she was, where she'd been found, the wheels of power would turn fast and merciless. She'd disappear again, this time forever. Elias looked down at her pale face, the steady beep of machines now standing between her and the cold. His heart pounded louder than the alarms. "She's my daughter," he said. The lie tasted like fear and salvation. "My name is Elias," he continued, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Her name is Sky. She's 5. She's been sick for days." The doctors didn't question him. They moved. Tubes, oxygen, urgency. Sky was rushed away, and Elias stood alone in the hallway, shaking so hard he had to lean against the wall. He expected guilt to crush him. Instead, he felt something else, something warm and terrifying. Hope. Hours passed, maybe more. Time blurred into the hum of fluorescent lights and the echo of footsteps. When the doctor finally returned, his expression softened. "She's stable," he said. "Hypothermia, respiratory infection." Another hour out there, and it would have been too late. Elias nodded, swallowing hard. Another hour. Another lie not told. Another choice made. He was allowed to see her briefly. Sky lay small beneath crisp white sheets, oxygen tubing resting against her cheek. Her hand twitched when he touched it, fingers curling weakly around his. For the first time since his own daughter died, Elias cried. Not loud, not dramatically, just silent tears that soaked into the hospital pillow as he whispered, "I won't leave you." The next days were filled with forms, questions, and careful half-truths. Elias learned how fragile lies could be, but also how powerful. He stayed by Sky's bedside, reading to her, holding her hand, watching color slowly return to her face. When she finally woke, her eyes fluttered open and landed on him. "Daddy," she whispered, confused and afraid. Elias's chest tightened. He should have corrected her, should have told her the truth right then. Instead, he smiled through tears and said, "I'm here." That night, as snow fell softly outside the hospital window, Elias understood the weight of what he'd done. He hadn't just saved a life. He had rewritten 2 of them. The lie he told wasn't born from greed or fear anymore. It was born from mercy. And mercy, he would learn, comes with a cost, one he would willingly pay for the girl who should have died in the mountains, but didn't. Sky's childhood was measured in hospital corridors and borrowed time. She learned the smell of antiseptic before she learned multiplication. She learned how to sit still in plastic chairs, swinging her legs while Elias argued quietly with nurses about payment plans. She learned that sickness wasn't a moment. It was a companion that followed her everywhere, settling into her lungs, her bones, her nights. But she also learned something else. She was never alone. Elias worked 3 jobs when he could, 2 when his body refused more. Construction at dawn, warehouse shifts through the afternoon, night driving when his eyes burned and his hands shook from exhaustion. He learned which bills could wait and which couldn't. He learned how to water down soup without Sky noticing. He learned how to smile when she asked why he wasn't hungry. Hospitals became their second home. Doctors came and went. Diagnoses changed names, but never meanings. Chronic, fragile, ongoing. Words that hovered over Sky's life like quiet warnings. When she cried in pain, Elias held her. When she screamed from fear, Elias stayed. When machines beeped too loudly in the night, Elias never slept. He never once told her she was a burden. Sometimes, when the world pressed too hard, he would sit beside her bed and tell stories. Not fairy tales of castles or magic, but simple ones. Stories about small victories. about storms survived, about how some people were given harder paths because they were strong enough to walk them. Sky believed him. She grew thinner than other children, paler, slower. She missed school days. She missed birthdays. She missed pieces of what other kids called normal, but she never missed love. Still, the past haunted her in fragments. Nightmares came without warning. Cold ones. She would wake up gasping, heart racing, whispering about trees, about white silence, about a man walking away without turning back. Elias would hold her until the shaking stopped, his jaw tight, guilt cutting deeper each time. "I had a bad dream," she'd say. "I know," he'd reply, "but you're safe now." And she was, because he made it so. Sky never questioned why she didn't look like him. Never questioned why there were no baby photos, no stories of her birth. When curiosity came, Elias answered gently, carefully, weaving truth and lie together so tightly even he couldn't always tell where one ended and the other began. The lie wasn't light. It aged him, bent his shoulders, carved lines into his face long before time should have. But love carried it. Across the country, another life was rising, polished, powerful, untouched by hospital floors or unpaid bills. Sky's biological father stood beneath glass towers and flashing cameras, his name spoken with admiration. He had climbed quickly, ruthlessly. Deals closed. Companies merged. Fortunes multiplied. And with them, a reputation carefully crafted. He donated to children's hospitals, funded research wings, appeared in interviews speaking solemnly about the importance of caring for the vulnerable. He wore grief like a tailored suit, visible enough to earn sympathy, distant enough to avoid pain. He spoke once, publicly, of a daughter lost too soon. A tragedy, a sickness, a heartbreak. No one questioned him. The insurance money from the child he declared dead became seed capital. Investors praised his resilience. The story of loss made him human. The story of charity made him untouchable. He never went back to the mountains. He never asked what happened after he walked away. Why would he? In his world, problems disappeared when money decided they should. Years passed. Sky grew older. Tayir. Still fragile, but sharper too. Pain had taught her observation. Silence had taught her listening. She noticed how Elias winced when he stood too fast, how his hands trembled after long shifts, how he avoided mirrors, as if ashamed of the man looking back. "Why do you work so much?" she asked him once, her voice soft. Elias smiled, tired. "Because you're worth it." She didn't fully understand, but she felt it. At 13, Sky spent more time reading than playing. She devoured books about the human body, about medicine, about systems that failed people quietly. She asked doctors questions that surprised them. She listened when they spoke about statistics and survival. At night, she wrote in a notebook she kept hidden under her mattress. Thoughts, questions, fragments of memory. Why do I remember snow? Why do trees feel like endings? Why does walking away feel familiar? Elias never read the notebook. He was afraid of what it might awaken in her and in himself. There were moments when the lie nearly collapsed, when social workers asked too many questions, when paperwork didn't line up, when Sky's illness demanded records that didn't exist. Each time, Elias stood firm. He learned the language of systems. He learned which truths to offer and which to guard. He learned that love sometimes meant fighting quietly, endlessly, against things much bigger than you. And through it all, Sky survived. Not easily, not cleanly, but fully. She laughed more as she grew older. She argued. She dreamed. She spoke about someday helping kids like her, kids who fell through cracks that powerful people pretended not to see. Elias watched her and felt pride so sharp it hurt. He also felt fear, because lies, no matter how lovingly built, have shadows. And shadows grow longer with time. Sky's real father stood at charity galas praising resilience. Elias stood in line at pharmacies counting coins. One man was celebrated for saving children. The other quietly gave his life to save one. Neither knew the reckoning was coming. But somewhere between hospital walls and crystal chandeliers, between a lie told for mercy and a lie told for profit, fate was closing the distance. And the girl who was once left to die in the snow was growing into someone who would one day demand answers. Not with anger, but with truth. Sky had always been observant. It was a skill born from necessity, years of watching the world move around her, carefully, silently, because one wrong step could mean another hospital visit, another round of pain. But now, at 16, that careful observation began to feel like a warning bell, ringing insistently in the back of her mind. It started with a name. Scrolling through the news on a cracked phone, she paused. Her pulse quickened, though she couldn't explain why. The headline glared at her. Billionaire philanthropist donates millions to children's hospitals. Beneath it, the smiling face of a man who looked vaguely familiar. Too familiar. She leaned closer. The photograph in the article featured children receiving donations, doctors applauding, cameras flashing. But something struck her, something she hadn't consciously realized until this moment. A child in the background, a girl wearing a red cardigan in one of the older photos. Her own cardigan, her own memories. Sky's fingers trembled as she dug deeper. Public records, old newspaper clippings, online archives. Each discovery felt like a strike against the carefully constructed world she had lived in. There was, plain and undeniable, a death certificate. Sky, reported dead at age 5 in a remote mountain accident. But she had lived. She had survived. Her stomach churned. Questions raced through her head faster than she could process. How? Why? Who? And the worst part, someone had profited. Millions had been collected in her name. Millions used to build an empire that had nothing to do with her survival. The anger bubbled, hot and sharp, but Sky forced herself to breathe. She was careful, trained by years of hardship, to think before she acted. She wouldn't crumble. She couldn't. Elias noticed the change immediately. He had seen glimpses before, in her quiet questions about identity, in her lingering glances at old photographs. But nothing prepared him for the torrent that hit when Sky finally confronted him in the dim kitchen one evening, papers spread across the table, her eyes blazing with a controlled fury. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice steady, almost too calm. Elias froze. The weight of years pressed down on him. For a moment, he considered lying again, but he knew she would see through it. Sky always did. He swallowed hard. I was paid to let you die," he confessed. His voice cracked under the admission. "I should have followed orders, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave you there. So I saved you." Sky listened. She did not shout. She did not cry. She merely absorbed the words, each syllable layering the complex puzzle of her life. The betrayal, the mercy, the sacrifice, the lie. "You lied to protect me," she said finally, her tone not accusatory, but resolute. "And he lied for greed, for money, for power, all while I was alive." Elias nodded, his throat tight. "I never wanted you to know this. I wanted to protect you from him, from the truth, from everything that could hurt you." Sky's mind raced, but the fear that had once dominated her life no longer held sway. This time, she felt clarity, purpose. She had survived the mountains. She had survived illness. She had survived years of quiet suffering. And now, she had a new mission. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said, determination sharpening her words. "I will fight, not just for me, but for everyone he's hurt, for every life he's used for his empire. I won't let him get away with this." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, hesitating. "Sky, it won't be easy. There's power and influence behind him. You could lose." "I've already lost," she replied firmly. "I've survived the mountains. I've survived the hospitals. I've survived waiting for someone to notice me. Now, it's his turn to face the truth." Her resolve crystallized that night. She spent hours poring over records, learning the intricacies of her father's empire, tracing every donation, every loophole, every legal maneuver. The pieces fell into place, forming a picture of deceit and manipulation, greed masked by public goodwill. But Sky did not falter. With Elias's guidance, she began documenting everything, collecting evidence, strategizing. For the first time, the fear that had been her constant companion, the fear of loss, the fear of vulnerability, was replaced by a burning determination. She remembered the red cardigan in the snow, the cold biting her small hands, the helplessness that had nearly ended her life. That memory, once a source of fear, became a weapon. A reminder that survival demanded courage, and justice demanded courage even more. Elias watched her with a mixture of awe and worry. The girl who had once clung to him in the hospital now stood tall, eyes alight with purpose. She was ready. Sky's teenage years transformed into a quiet campaign of preparation. Every day, she strengthened herself, mentally and emotionally. Every fact uncovered, every connection traced, was a step toward confronting the man who had once turned his back on her, the man who had profited from her supposed death. The final piece fell into place one evening when she discovered an old photograph tucked in a charity brochure from years ago. A smiling man, a gala event, and in the background, the unmistakable red cardigan from her childhood. That single image confirmed what she had already known deep down. The world had celebrated her death, and the man had profited unchallenged. Sky did not break. Not in anger, not in despair, not in disbelief. Instead, she steeled herself. She would face him. She would expose the truth. She would dismantle the empire built on her suffering, and she would do it with the same resilience that had carried her through snow, illness, and abandonment. That night, as she closed the files and photographs, Elias finally allowed himself to hope. The lie that saved her had also given her the strength to seek justice. And Sky was ready to take it. No more running. No more hiding. The truth had awakened, and with it, a storm was coming. Sky was going to make sure the world remembered her, not as a shadow in the snow, not as a sick child, not as a story of tragedy, but as a force no lie could ever erase. The gala glittered with wealth, influence, and carefully curated smiles. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars, and a murmur of polite conversation mixed with clinking glasses and the soft hum of a live orchestra. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing the grandeur of a night meant to celebrate generosity and to conceal truths better left unspoken. Sky walked quietly through the crowd, her red gown brushing against polished marble floors. No one recognized her. No one expected her. She had spent years learning the rhythms of this world, how to move unseen, how to gather information without suspicion, how to let patience become a weapon. Every document, every record, every hidden truth she had unearthed over the years was carefully compiled, ready for the moment that would shatter a carefully built illusion. And now it was time. She approached the stage where her father stood, smiling for cameras, offering handshakes, and carefully practiced words about charity, resilience, and the importance of caring for children. The irony was suffocating. Every story he told, every speech he delivered, had been built on her absence, her suffering, her death, and the millions he had gained from it. Sky stepped forward, the crowd parting around her. Whispers began almost immediately, questions and curious glances bouncing through the room. She held her head high, her voice steady, unshakable. "I'm Sky," she said, her words cutting through the hum of the gala like a sharp wind. "I'm the daughter you declared dead 15 years ago." For a moment, the room froze. Forks hovered in midair. Glasses trembled in hands. Cameras clicked frantically, trying to capture the impossible. Her father froze first. The confident billionaire, praised for his philanthropy and admired for his kindness, turned pale. His carefully constructed mask cracked as he realized the truth was no longer hidden behind mountains, contracts, or polite applause. Sky continued, each word deliberate, measured. "You collected millions in my name. You built an empire on my supposed death. You smiled in public, praised for your charity, while the child you abandoned survived because someone else chose mercy over obedience." She let the pause linger, letting every syllable sink into the stunned audience. Cameras captured it all. The revelation, the shock, the unraveling of a legacy built on lies. Her father's voice trembled when he finally spoke, trying to mask fear with authority. "Sky, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she interrupted. I understand the cruelty of power without humanity. I understand what it feels like to be left to die. And I understand that no apology can erase what you did. But the world will now see the truth. With that, she presented the evidence she had gathered over the years. Documents, photographs, insurance records, and correspondences showing the calculated steps he had taken to profit from her death. The room erupted in gasps. Reporters scrambled. Donors whispered frantically. The foundation he had built, the reputation he had polished, the empire he had crafted, all crumbled in the glare of undeniable truth. Her father, once untouchable, sank into himself. No applause, no sympathy, only the weight of exposure. Sky's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, not out of pity, but with quiet resolve. I survived because someone chose humanity, she said, looking toward Elias, who had silently entered the room, standing in the shadows. I will not let lies dictate the world any longer. And just like that, the man who had abandoned her, the billionaire who had thought he could erase a child from the world, was forced to confront what he had tried to bury. Sky had returned, not for forgiveness, not for revenge, but for justice. The empire of falsehoods could no longer stand, and she was the living proof that truth, once awakened, could never be silenced. This wasn't a story about wealth, status, or revenge. It was a story about choices, the kind that define who we truly are. One man chose ambition and fortune over his own child, believing that power could erase responsibility. In the end, he lost more than money. He lost the chance to witness the life he tried to erase. Another man chose compassion over obligation, mercy over payment. He carried a little girl through snow and silence, and in doing so, became a father not by blood, but by heart. Through years of struggle, sacrifice, and tireless devotion, he showed that love is measured in action, not in promises. Sometimes, the people who save us aren't the ones who created us. They're the ones who stay, who fight, and who refuse to let life's cruelty define us. And sometimes the truth does not tiptoe in quietly. It returns, steady and unyielding, demanding to be seen, demanding justice. Slow or swift, it has one certainty: it never forgets. Sky's story is a testament to that: survival, courage, and the unshakable power of truth.